Shalom and welcome back to By His Grace Marriage Ministry Podcast. My name is Amanda and I welcome you all to today's episode, and I pray that you all are doing well. I want to first start by saying that I am so sorry that I haven't published any episodes in a little over a month. It has been a really trying time for me and my family, really mostly for me. It's definitely been quite a trial that I'm walking through, a really big affliction. But I can say it has taught me to lean into my faith, to trust the Father with this situation, even though it has been so challenging. But I'm thankful that He has given me the strength to endure and that He continues to sustain me daily through the situation that I have going on. So today's episode, I've decided to share what all is happening in my life right now. And I'm going to do this because I actually shared quite a bit of this situation in one of my episodes that is a part of a series that I had done quite some time ago. But the last episode to the series was fairly recent. I did a series a while back entitled The Dangers of Lust and Infatuation. Might be vice versa, infatuation and lust, I'm not sure. But I did a series on this because this is a marriage podcast, advice on marriage and relationships, faith-based, of course. And I felt it was really important to address this situation or this area of, just relationships and what can happen between two individuals, because it's a very common thing, sadly, and it can be a very dangerous thing that can happen. And one of the things that I noticed in studying the scriptures is, believe it or not, this is talked about quite a bit within scriptures. I believe in either the first or second episode of the series, I actually shared a lot of examples from scripture concerning the problem and dangers of lust and infatuation or even obsession. And so in the last episode of that series, I decided to share my story. You see, one of the main reasons why I had decided to do this series, other than what I just stated before, was also because it was something that I was personally walking through. And unfortunately, it hasn't ended. In fact, it's only escalated a little bit more. And to be honest with you, right now as I record this episode, I'm still currently going through it, and I don't know when the situation will end. I keep praying daily for Yahuwah to deliver me from this situation. I have repented and asked for forgiveness for anything that I have done wrong throughout this, or even if I'm part of the reason of why this all came about to begin with. It's also taught me a lot as a human, as a woman, and the ways that the flesh works, and that no matter how long we've been walking with Yahuwah and Yahushua, we're always subject to our flesh, and that we must crucify our flesh daily. Because, brothers and sisters, it's so easy to end up going back into the ways of the flesh, our old ways, being tempted. And we can see that this happened even in the very beginning with Adam and Eve and Satan, when Satan tempted Eve. It's a daily battle, brothers and sisters. And one thing that this situation has taught me is that we have to stand strong, and we have to crucify our flesh daily and walk in the Ruach, in the Spirit. I've realized how vulnerable I am and how much I truly still need to work on myself and continue to seek the Father and to seek Yahushua and to keep my eyes on them and to remain steadfast in my faith and in my walk and in my prayer life. Because, brothers and sisters, when we don't, as the scripture says, the enemy, the devil, he walks around like a roaring lion, waiting to pounce, waiting to devour. The minute he sees an opening in any of our lives to creep in and to attack, to tempt, he will do it. We truly all have sinful nature. And if we're not careful, it's so easy to slip up. It truly, truly is. Just because we proclaim to be believers, because we walk in the ways, doesn't mean that we're not susceptible to falling victim to temptation from the enemy. And brothers, sisters, the more that we are walking in the ways and the truth and in Yah's commandments, the harder the enemy is going to come after us. The more we need to be vigilant and on guard. I will say that one of the things that has been probably hardest for me is feeling like I've been walking through this situation alone, feeling as if nobody would believe me, feeling as if nothing would be done. One thing that I've learned recently with this situation and the journey that I've been going through with this is that sadly, our justice system is corrupt. The laws and statutes that we have, the way that things are done by law, I realize that it's very, very wrong. And I've always known, I've always had this, knowledge that there's a lot that is wrong within our world, within our society. However, through most of my life, I've never had to be involved in any legal entanglements or any, court proceedings or anything, legal or anything like that. I've never had much knowledge or experience within that area until recently. And I can tell you that it's one of the other things that this situation has opened up my eyes to is that we have a very unfair and very just wrong justice system or judicial system. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and just share what has gone on in the past little over a month. Again, I shared in one of the last episodes of the series, The Dangers of Lust and Infatuation. I shared a personal story of something similar that I have been going through and still am. I'll do a quick recap for those of you who maybe haven't listened to that episode, or maybe it's been some time and you don't quite remember. Basically, I ended up in a situation where I became friendly with a male individual who works at the apartment complex where I reside. Long story short, feelings and attraction came about, and strong or severe infatuation ended up following soon after that. When I realized everything that was happening, several months had already passed by, and I realized that I needed to set healthy and strong and clear boundaries with the individual, which sadly I hadn't done beforehand because I was blinded. And I guess it was a spiritual attack that came about me at a very, very vulnerable time of my life. And by the time I realized what was happening, it had already, I guess, sunk its hooks into me. So when I tried to set boundaries, things didn't go very well. The individual didn't take it very well. The other thing was that I had begun to realize that the individual was showing several red flags or warning signs about who he was. A couple of them just being really severe, primarily being that the individual was or is mentally unstable. The mental instability ended up manifesting itself in much bigger ways down the road, which is what I'm getting ready to get into. So I shared that the individual began to become very jealous and possessive with pretty much, anybody that I spoke with, but mainly with neighbors of mine. So much so that he ended up bringing those individuals into it to where he ended up verbally abusing them and harassing them, which was more warning signs for me, because then I learned that this was a very angry individual on top of being mentally unstable. And then on top of that, learning that this individual is an alcoholic. So as I started to see these things, it really, really started to hit me like a ton of bricks how serious the situation was and what I had probably gotten myself into. It got to the point where I finally felt that I needed to bring the situation to the attention of the leasing office where I reside. The individual not only works here at the apartment complex, but also resides here. So it was very hard because we were always seeing each other. And then I started to realize that it wasn't just because he worked and lived here, but that he was actually making it a point to stalk me. He began to show the only way I can really express it is creepy behavior, and again, he had always shown these signs, but I didn't see it in the beginning because I was blinded. When it got to the point that I decided that I needed to bring it to the attention of our leasing office, it took me a little bit of time. I kept praying to Yahuwah to show me the right way to go about this. Because I had cared for the individual, I didn't want the individual to be terminated from his job and then lose the roof over his head. It's just the heart that I have. Even though I was seeing a lot of concerns and things were escalating. Finally, there was a day where he did something that just really made me feel uncomfortable, and I decided that that was it. I was going to bring it to the attention of the leasing office. It's hard for me to do, and it took quite a bit of courage. And even that day when I did that, this individual ended up stalking me. I actually chose that time to do it because he was on vacation. At least that's what I was told. I guess he stayed home, didn't go anywhere, because that same day that I had gone into the office to report, he had seen me go into the office, and then he decided to go into the office as well because he saw me go in there. I think he had a feeling that I was going to report him. So when I, initially brought it to the office, immediately I felt that it was not taken seriously. In fact, I felt that it was, downplayed and that they were automatically siding with the employee. So then I had to turn around and report it to higher ups or the upper management. Upper management never got back to me, but I was told by the office about a month later that supposedly the upper management had come and spoke to an individual and told the individual to more or less stay in his lane and not to bother me anymore. Well, that didn't last very long. And this was another concern of mine because this individual is the type that doesn't really care, especially if that individual is drinking or under the influence. All of that just kind of goes out the window. But I want to say about a few weeks to a month after that was the first time that he began to verbally harass my friends, my neighbors, all because they were friends of mine. He was jealous of the closeness and the friendship that I had with this individual. It was around that time, I think towards the end of December, that me and my neighbors both finally decided that it was time to involve the police because of the verbal harassment that had taken place, because of the things he had been doing with me. At that point, we all felt uncomfortable and we were concerned for our safety because we all live here and the individual works here. So we involved the police, and of course, they notated everything, but the only thing they really said was, well, there's no probable cause because there isn't really concrete evidence or proof. I asked the officer how I could obtain proof of stalking and harassment, And their answer to us was to record when we could, write down, document, all situations that happened, which I had already done. But basically, they were telling us to record everything. Another suggestion that they made was to go for a restraining order or a protective order if I feared for my safety, which at that point I was concerned for my safety because the individual had shown signs of instability, and I just didn't know how far this person would go. And the fact that they were continuing after being told not to do it anymore by his job, it was cause for concern for me. So I was at the end of December. So fast forward into February, I finally was able to request a meeting with upper management to speak face to face to explain everything, because at that point, I just felt that I wasn't being taken seriously, not by the police, not by the office, not by anybody. And I believe the police officer, when we first contacted them, even spoke with the individual, But again, law enforcement, court, all that, they're all about concrete proof and evidence, which I just didn't have. I only had my word. Now, I had my neighbors as witnesses because they usually were with me when these things would happen. My neighbor had become a witness to the fact that this man was stalking me and had harassed, certain individuals. And, there were even complaints that had come to the office from other people outside of that situation concerning this individual. And yet he was still here. And that was one of the things that I was really shocked about. And when I asked them what all they were doing, they said that they had taken our complaints in the situation to their human resources department and their legal team, which means that it was to be taken seriously. But 3 months had gone by. And when 3 months had gone by, I knew that more than likely they weren't going to do anything with the individual. It was basically similar to what the police had said, that they just really didn't have anything to go off of. Meanwhile, there were still all of these small incidences of him stalking me and the creepy behavior. There were several of them that we would document. And then basically what I tried to do was I tried to leave a paper trail with the police. So every time something happened, I would call them and document it. The problem with that was, at least how it works here in my state, is every time something else happens, you have to call back in to dispatch and you have to have an officer come back out and talk to you and report it. Because I was trying to now build an official police report. So that was a tiring process all in itself. Then in February again, I finally was able to sit down with upper management to just discuss it face to face, because I felt upper management didn't really understand why everything was happening. And, I basically had to start from the beginning, from when me and this individual first met, and just kind of go in order in a timeline and explain how and why everything got to the point that it has. So at the end of that meeting, upper management told me that, my feelings were valid. They asked what did I want to, see out of the situation. And I told them, I just want the individual to stop. And, I also feel that he's a danger to myself and to others. And that, quite honestly, I don't understand how this person can still be employed here just with everything that's gone on. And this wasn't even including the stuff I found out about this man's background and criminal history, which I'll share in just a few minutes. But I didn't know about this yet until I met with my lawyer. So then upper management discussed, they said, well, we know that you can't move right now, so what things do you think we can do to help you to feel better or to feel safe or whatever? And, of course, my first thought is remove him, either terminate him, transfer him to another, property, something, But they had to do everything through their legal team. Everything has to be legal. They have to find a basis and a reason and whatever. So, which I had asked, are you guys still investigating this, or have you decided to drop everything against him? And that upper management told me that it was taking time because it has to go through different departments, which quite frankly didn't make sense to me, but I just left it at that. So we discussed safety measures, and the only two things that they offered was to change the lock to my apartment, and that if I wanted, they would make an exception for me to put a doorbell security camera. And then she, just like, police, why don't you try for a protective order or restraining order, right? So the lock change took place a week after that meeting. Honestly, brothers and sisters, this didn't really provide any kind of peace of mind, because again, this individual is the maintenance tech at our apartment complex, which means that he has access to keys. And that was one of my bigger concerns through this entire thing, was that if this man had decided to just, maybe one day drinking or angry or all of the above, could technically, let himself into the apartment and do harm, you know? So they did a lock change, and I'm just like, okay, but how does this really deter this individual? Because he still has access to the key. It's just a different key now. Now, upper management at the meeting told me, they said, well, if he pulls the key, we'll be notified. They never explained to me how they would be notified, what kind of system this is, or anything. And then my thought process was, okay, let's say that you are notified. What if this man decides to do this at like 1 o'clock in the morning? You'll be notified, but you won't come to know or see about it until in the morning. And by then, it could be too late. So honestly, the log change didn't really provide peace of mind, or essentially stop this man from coming into my apartment if he truly wanted to. And the next thing was, okay, I'm going to try a camera. Now, I've never had one of these in my life, and I really wasn't sure if we were going to be able to do this, because I figured this is very expensive to do. Like, how would we be able to do this? And praise be to Yah that when kind of did some looking around, we were able to find an affordable camera from Amazon, and was able to actually purchase that and able to put that. Now, I will say that has been a wonderful tool. However, again, like with the lock change, it provides some peace of mind, but at the end of the day, again, if this individual was in a really bad state of mind, could technically rip off the camera, take it down, or even if he does come, yes, I'll have proof, but it's not really going to stop him from doing anything to me, is it? I don't know. By the time I'm alerted that he's at my door or something like that, or whatever, calling even 911 takes a few minutes. By then, he could have already let himself in and done whatever, Yah forbid. So between those two things, and then having, my neighbor, when they can, to, be with me when I go check my mail, throw out trash, or go anywhere on the property, those are technically my 3 safety measures. However, then aren't really the greatest safety measures. They don't really guarantee or stop this individual from doing any kind of harm if he was to choose to do that. So I will tell you that this person is still stalking me, just as recent as last week. And I've been actively working to try to record this individual, but it's hard to record someone without them noticing. And, I don't want this man to see and then become even more angry that I'm trying to record him. And that was something that I was trying to explain to the police was, how on earth do I do that without him noticing? They make it sound so simple, and, it's really not simple. It's not an easy thing to do. Not only that, but like I explained to them and my friends, that when you're in that type of situation, the last thing that's on your mind is take out your phone and record. You either go blank, you're paralyzed with fear, or you're in, fight or flight mode. You're anxious, you have anxiety. So that's been a really difficult thing to do. I've gotten to the point, brothers and sisters, where I've gone online and I've been doing research to educate myself about what's happening to me, because I am at a point where I've realized how serious the situation is. Not only that, but it's a form of abuse. And I've talked about abusiveness in this podcast before. I've talked about the types of abuse that there are. There's physical abuse, there's verbal abuse, there's psychological abuse, which basically under that umbrella of psychological would be emotional, mental, and then we've got, of course, sexual abuse, and I'm missing one. Let's see, physical, verbal, psychological, spiritual, and spiritual abuse. So those are the different types of abuse, right? And so I realized that being stalked, being harassed falls under psychological abuse. It also falls under domestic abuse or domestic violence, believe it or not. And I was actually shocked to learn that. So I started doing research, trying to figure out what resources I could go to, because nothing was really helping. Not going to the police, going to leasing off, nothing was working, because nothing was happening to this individual. And because there were no repercussions really, despite the fact that he was talked to by management, he was talked to by police. He had been talked to and, told to stop, but he's really not. And the thing about it is that when he does the stalking, etc., he does it very wisely. It is very hard to build up proof and evidence that someone is stalking and harassing you. So if any of you have any advice, please send an email to the ministry email, because I really don't know what else to do. But I've been looking for resources. I only have just a handful of people that I've shared this with, that believe me, that have taken it seriously, and that are trying to support me. But I've been looking for other resources, outside resources, to see if there's any support. I did come across a website that is support for victims of stalking and harassment, and any other types of domestic abuse. And I even took an assessment, and I answered questions about the situation, and the report came back that yes, it's a serious situation of stalking. And then I was able to come across a handbook. I studied that as well, just again to educate myself on what to do in this type of situation, and even had a safety plan created. Then after that, I decided that maybe it was time to pursue a restraining order or protective order. This was something for me that I was a bit nervous about, because I really just wasn't sure how to go about this. I've never had to do anything like this before. Praise be to the Most High that I already had a lawyer. And when I had a lawyer for something else, and when I shared with my lawyer the situation, it actually ended up opening up a door for me to be able to kickstart the process of filing for a restraining order or a protective order. So I was so thankful to have the help from 2 different lawyers to help fill out the necessary paperwork, to file the paperwork at the court. And then after that, I was to attend a hearing the very next day. You can imagine that I was a nervous wreck, because I've never done anything like this before. I'm not familiar with any type of court proceedings, other than one time back in 2019. I was summoned for jury duty, and I was actually picked to be a part of the jury. That's the only experience I've ever really had in a court. It's a little bit different when it has to do with you. So I remember being in a lot of prayer and just asking Yahuwah for guidance and understanding of what to do in this situation. But even as I was praying, I really felt that maybe I was going to be able to obtain a restraining order, because I felt the door had opened and that Yahuwah was making a way for me to actually do this. So even though I was nervous, I went the next morning to the hearing with confidence and faith that I would find favor with the judge and that I would obtain a restraining order. Now, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted this, of course, for my safety, but also because I found out through management here at the apartment complex that if I obtain a restraining order against this individual, they would have no choice but to transfer him to another property. Now, I saw this as the best resolve to the situation, because not only would it remove this individual and I would no longer have to live in fear and in anxiety and uncomfortable and awkwardness, but I also felt at peace and felt better knowing that the individual wouldn't necessarily lose his job either and end up in the street. So I thought it would be the best resolve is to just transfer the employee, because he would have to be so many feet away from me. With this being a small property, there'd be no way that he would have been able to work here or live here because we're on the same property. So I went that morning to the hearing with my lawyer, and I stood before the judge. We had filed the papers. We were very detailed in the explanation of everything going on, and I submitted whatever little evidence that I had and prayed that it would be enough. But I stood before the judge, and when the judge reviewed everything, she told me that they were going to deny my request for a restraining order. Some of the few things that she said was she felt that the situation was consensual and that there just wasn't enough evidence. Despite everything that I put in the paperwork, how it's affected my life, how I fear for my safety, how it's a hard circumstance because he works and lives where I live, all the things he's done. We even attached previous files and records to this individual that I thought that the judge would have looked at and been like, okay, yes, we need to do this. But I was denied. I left the court just feeling so discouraged and so depleted and exhausted. And I just couldn't understand why all of this was happening this way. Why was this man essentially getting off scot-free? Why was he still here? Why was I denied a protective order? And what was I supposed to do? I can't move. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, through my official police report and through statements of the office, I ended up finding out that the office had lied to me and that they had dismissed the allegations against the individual some time ago, even though they told me they were still investigating it. So not only had they lied to me about that, but they ended up deciding that he hadn't done anything wrong. And if that wasn't bad enough, the things that I found out through my lawyer about the individual really put even more stress and anxiety in me and really raised my concerns. While working with my lawyer to fill out and file paperwork for a possible restraining order, I found out quite a bit about the individual's past and history. I found out that he definitely has had a problem with alcohol for some time, which I knew he was an alcoholic. He had had a DUI. He also had in the past had 2 restraining orders against him. Both restraining orders at some point he violated. And he had also done some jail time due to these violations and contempt of court, which let me know that he obviously has an anger issue, which I had seen. And the worst of them all was the restraining orders were due to domestic violence. So I remember going home that day just trying to process everything. And I remember crying because I felt so many different things. I felt concerned, I felt scared, I felt angry, and then I felt bad for this individual. And then I just kept asking myself that how did this get to where it has? But I had never felt so discouraged as I had that day when the judge denied my request. It was hard enough for me to do all of this, to go this far as to go to court and to stand before a judge, but then to be denied. It got to the point, brothers and sisters, which this is a common thing that occurs when you're a victim of psychological abuse, where I started to question myself. I started to wonder if I was going crazy. Was I overreacting? Was I seeing these things? Because so many people made it seem like it wasn't happening or it wasn't bad enough. And of course, the individual, in his statements in the police report, of course, he denies it all. He denied it with the police. He denied it with the leasing office. And he's still here. And he's still stalking. Thankfully, there hasn't been any harassment as of lately, but there's been stalking. I just met with my lawyer again last week to discuss any other possibilities of options before I essentially throw in the towel. I'm not a person to quit or give up, but I just don't see any other way. I don't see anything else that can be done. But I thought I'd meet with my lawyer one more time just to see if there was anything else. She told me there was only one of two things that could happen in this situation. She said that if I wanted to try to refile for a restraining order, I would have to build up evidence. And building up evidence could take time. It could take months. It could take years. It's hard to establish and build evidence of someone stalking and harassing you. She said once that I had more of that, to let the police know, and then we could try and refile for a restraining order. She said the only other option is for me to move, to get away from here, which is not an option. Friday night, last night, I realized that there's a possibility that my phone may have been hacked. Now, these are some things that I had read about when I had done research on stalking and harassment. And I almost wonder if it's possible that this individual could have hacked my phone. He always seems to know where I am, and me and my neighbor have always wondered how that is. And he did have my phone number and other information on me. I remember reading and studying a book about narcissism. The author of that book also explained that her narcissist had done the same thing to her, hacked her devices. Brothers and sisters, this has been a trying time. It has been a very, very trying time. I even thought about, maybe possibly starting another GoFundMe. We just did another one to help with the situation with with the same people, with the apartment complex, where they were saying that we owed an amount, which I still feel they were doing that so that we would no longer be living here. I truly feel they want to keep the individual as their employee and would probably rather rid of us. But we did a GoFundMe for that. Praise be to the Most High that we were able to raise enough to cover that, even though we still didn't feel we should have paid it because we didn't owe it, but we felt that it was the only thing to do. Now we're really thinking and praying about to try to raise money to get out of here because I don't know what else to do to prove what this man is doing. And it has, I've told this to my lawyer, to loved ones, to the police, to the leasing office, that this has affected my quality of living. It's sad that I can't even go to the mailboxes to check my mail without looking over my shoulder or feeling uncomfortable or not being able to be alone to do it. This person is everywhere. He pops up everywhere. And when I say he has creepy behavior, he has very creepy behavior. And I do worry about my safety because this individual is unstable. This individual has potential rage. This individual is an alcoholic. And I truly feel that this man has a very unhealthy obsession with me. because he's not let go, he has not stopped. Just based on how things started and how they were between us, I know that that's what it is. And brothers and sisters, sadly, we hear about this often, where many women lose their lives in these types of situations. And I now understand why. Because there's not much that can be done in these situations. Our justice system, our law enforcement, they're so corrupt. I remember telling my lawyer the day I walked out of the hearing, I said, so basically there's no preventative measures. I have to wait for something to happen to me. I either have to wait for this man to physically break into my apartment or to harm me, to beat me, to rape me, or maybe even kill me before anything can be done. I'm trying to keep myself safe and prevent any of those things from happening to me. But yet there's no way to do that because I tried. So that is where I'm at, brothers and sisters. I try daily to focus on Yahuwah and His Word. I've been wanting so much to continue to work on the podcast, and you know, I've been so exhausted. I am mentally and emotionally drained. And because of my health issue, my main one being fibromyalgia, all of this that I've been going through has affected my health physically in a tremendous way. Sometimes I feel to isolate myself, and I know that that's not a good thing to do. And if I'm being honest, and I'm not one to ever feel this way, and I've never had this problem ever in my life, but I've been very close to falling into a very deep depression. I keep praying for Yahuwah to help me with the next steps and what to do, to make a way to deliver me again, like I said earlier in the episode, to deliver me from the situation. And it just hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure why, and I try not to question Yahuwah, but I know that He has a plan, and His timing is different from ours. I'm not sure if there's anything else I'm supposed to learn from the situation, if this is a punishment, if this is a test. I don't know why this is happening other than errors and mistakes that were made and just not guarding and being diligent in guarding and being vigilant to the attacks of the enemy. But I also know that Yahuwah fights for us and that He goes before us and that He, saves us and He protects us. But I don't quite understand why this situation continues. And it has really affected me in a great way. In a very, 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 very negative way. So, but I felt to come on and to share with you all, even though this is, very personal, but I wanted to share with you all why I've been absent from the podcast, and also to ask for prayer. May y'all would please keep me in prayer in regards to this situation, and also to pray for the individual as well. Please pray for the individual. For reasons of privacy, I will not state his name, but Yahuwah knows who it is. So if you could please pray for me, pray for the situation, pray that Yahuwah would reveal next steps or that He would make a way for deliverance. And please pray for the individual that is doing this. But I really need peace of mind, brothers and sisters. I really do. I want to be set free from the stronghold that has just caused a great deal of, anxiety and stress and several other things. I hope to continue working on the audio scriptures again soon. Again, I apologize for the delay. I really hope to start doing that here soon, as soon as things can settle down a little bit more. There's quite a bit as well that's going on outside of that of that situation, but those are a bit minor. But um, I'm trying to do my best, brothers and sisters. So that is everything. If you have any questions or concerns, or just want to reach out to say hello or to communicate, please do send an email to the ministry email. For those of you who feel led to maybe help financially, again, I'm not one to usually ask something like this, but if the only option I have is to move, I really need to start saving what I can to make that happen. As most of you know, it is a lot of money. It is very costly to move nowadays. So it's very sad. You would think that they would have just transferred the individual. That would have been the most easiest and logical thing to do versus having to uproot me and my family and move. But that's the way that it goes. So, but if you feel led to help in that way, please send me an email and I can send you either Cash App or PayPal information, or even the link to the GoFundMe. The link to the GoFundMe will basically be attached to the original GoFundMe that we put, which was to help us avoid possible eviction because, again, of the situation I spoke about in one of my last episodes. So if you feel led to help there, I will try to attach the link to that GoFundMe in the description below. If I'm not able to do that and you feel led to help, please email me, reach out and email me, and I will send you that link through the email. All right, that is everything, brothers and sisters. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for your prayers. I truly, truly appreciate it very, very much. I look forward to talking with you all again soon. Shalom.